The night was colder than usual in the towering city of glass and steel. A veil of mist clung to the streets below, and from the 72nd floor of the Delmore Tower, the world seemed distant, almost unreal. The city's lights shimmered like constellations, trapped in concrete and glass. But inside the penthouse of the most powerful man in the city, the air was thick, not with the warmth of luxury, but with the weight of secrets. The billionaire's name was Adrian Kane, a name that commanded respect. In the boardrooms, fear in the press, and envy among his rivals. To the world he was a visionary, a man who built an empire from nothing. But to her, to the quiet maid who swept his marble floors every morning, he was something else entirely, a predator. A man whose empire was built not just on business brilliance, but on the shattered lives of those too powerless to fight back. Her name was Naomi Fields. She was 28, sharp-eyed and silent. The other staff often wondered why she never spoke, unless absolutely necessary. Why she never looked Kane in the eye. The truth was, Naomi knew more about him than anyone else in that building. Not because she searched for it, but because secrets have a way of spilling when powerful men think no one is listening. She had been in the room when the phone calls came, when Kane's tone changed from polished charm to icy threats. She had emptied the trash bins filled with torn papers that, when pieced together, told stories darker than any tabloid could imagine. She had once picked up an envelope by mistake, a heavy one sealed in red wax and addressed to Kane in handwriting that looked like it belonged to another era. Inside was a single photograph of a young woman, her face, pale eyes, empty, with a smear of red across her cheek, and written on the back in jagged letters was 3 words, "You'll be next." Naomi never told anyone about the photograph, but from that night on, she noticed Kane watching her differently. Not the way a man watches a woman, but the way a wolf watches the last lamb in the field. Still, she came back every day sweeping dust from the same cold marble floors, polishing the same glass that reflected the skyline like a blade. She came back because she had a plan and a patience that Kane would never understand. Her first step had been simple. Learn the building better than anyone. Naomi could navigate every service tunnel, every blind spot in the cameras, every code that unlocked the hidden stairwells Kane used when he wanted to avoid attention. She knew which nights the security detail rotated, which guards drank on the job, and which doors Kane locked twice. She also knew his patterns. Kane was a man of ritual breakfast alone at 6:30 in the glass. Atrium calls from 7 to 10. A closed door meeting every Tuesday night with 2 men who never gave their names and always his study. Light stayed on past midnight. On those nights, Naomi would be working in the library adjacent to his study, dusting books that no one ever read. From there, she would hear fragments of conversations, voices tense, urgent, and always the same word whispered like a curse. Delphi. Naomi didn't know what Delphi meant, but she knew it was dangerous. The turning point came on a Thursday. In late October, Kane had left abruptly in the middle of a meeting, leaving behind a folder on his desk. Naomi wasn't the kind to snoop, but something about the way he had clutched it and then abandoned it made her fingers itch. She waited until the hallway was empty before slipping into his study. The folder was thick, bound in leather. Inside were contracts, offshore bank statements, and photographs of land Naomi recognized. Acres of untouched forest, 200. Miles north of the city. But what froze her blood wasn't the land or the money. It was a blueprint for something massive hidden underground. Naomi traced the lines of the drawing. It wasn't a building. It was a facility. The kind with reinforced walls and heavy gates, the kind you built when you didn't want anyone getting in or out. The last page had a single name written in bold letters, Project Delphi. She didn't hear Kane return until it was too late. His shadow stretched across the desk before his voice cut the air low and deadly. "What exactly do you think you're doing, Naomi?" The sound of her name in his mouth was a knife. She closed the folder, slowly meeting his gaze for the first time. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and just as merciless. "Cleaning, sir," she said evenly, placing the folder back as if it burned her skin. Kane studied her for a moment longer than necessary, then smiled, a smile without warmth. "Good, keep it that way." That night, Naomi didn't go home. She stayed in the staff quarters, lying awake on the narrow bed, replaying the moment over and over. She knew now that Delphi wasn't just a word. It was the key to everything. And if she was right, Kane had just marked her as a threat, but he didn't know was that she had already made copies of the most incriminating pages. She had hidden them where no one would think to look inside the hollow of an old broom handle in the supply closet. From that night on, Naomi became more than a maid. She became a shadow. A ghost moving through Kane's empire, collecting pieces of a puzzle that could bring it all crashing down. She learned that Project Delphi was tied to a network of private contracts, foreign investors, and something far worse: disappearances. People whose names never appeared in the news, but whose absence was felt in the small towns and villages scattered across the country. And Kane was at the center of it all. Naomi didn't yet know how she would bring him down. But she knew this: if she played her cards right, there would come a day when Adrian Kane would be forced to kneel. The rain came hard the next morning, drumming against the glass walls of Delmore Tower like a warning. Naomi moved silently through the penthouse, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. She had been replaying every detail of the blueprint. In her head all night, memorizing every line and measurement. She didn't have the luxury of taking photos. Kane's office was a fortress of surveillance, and even the smallest slip could give her away. But her mind was a steel trap, and she carried the map inside her. Now she found Kane in the dining room, reading the morning paper. He didn't look up when she entered, but she could feel his eyes on her in the reflection of the glass. He was testing her, seeing if the previous night had rattled her. It had. But not in the way he thought. Naomi poured his coffee, steady hands, no tremor in her voice, when she said, "Anything else, sir?" He shook his head just once, but the silence between them felt heavier than the marble table later that afternoon. Naomi slipped away from her regular duties and into the lower levels of the building. The Delmore Tower had 3 underground floors most people didn't know about. The first 2 were for parking. The third was different. No one but Kane's inner circle ever went down there. Naomi had been there once to deliver a package, and she remembered the reinforced door and the retinal scanner. She also remembered the guard stationed there, a man with eyes like dead stone. She needed to get past him, but not yet. For now she needed to map every access point, every path that could take her to that 3rd floor without alerting Kane. She began with the maintenance logs. The building kept detailed records of every electrical fault, plumbing issue, and security check. Most of them were digital, but Naomi had access to the hard copies in the storage room. While other maids took their breaks, she pored over the dusty folders until she found what she needed: a diagram of the utility tunnels beneath the tower. They were cramped and dangerous, with low ceilings and exposed wiring, but they connected almost every part of the building, including the restricted lower floor. Naomi traced the lines with her finger. She would need keys and codes. She didn't yet have, but she was closer now. That night she stayed late cleaning the library again. The soft scratch of her duster against the spines of books was the only sound until she heard voices from Kane's study. It wasn't unusual, but the tone of his voice caught her attention, clipped, sharp, and angry. She edged closer, keeping herself in the shadows. "I told you the schedule has to move forward," Kane was saying. "We can't afford delays." The other voice, deep and accented, replied, "It's not the funding, it's the shipment. Customs is asking questions." Kane's voice dropped to a growl. "Then make them stop asking. You know how to handle it." The conversation ended with the sound of crystal glasses clinking. A toast, Naomi thought, but to what she didn't linger. Instead, she slipped away, leaving the library before Kane could see her. Over the next week, Naomi's investigation became more dangerous. She started using her cleaning cart as cover-carrying tools. She wasn't supposed to have a small flashlight, a set of duplicate keys. She had filed herself a tiny recorder hidden inside a can of furniture polish. She learned the guard at the restricted door was named Voss ex-military and completely loyal to Kane. But loyalty could be bought or broken. She just needed to know which applied to him. Her first real break came unexpectedly. She was cleaning the main kitchen when she overheard two of Kane's assistants talking. One of them, a man named Lyle, was complaining about having to deliver a case of wine to the northern property. Naomi's ears pricked up. She knew Kane had a hunting lodge up north, but she had never heard anyone speak about it like it was in active use. Lyle muttered something about needing to pack more than wine this time, and the other assistant chuckled. "Low profile my ass," he said. "That place is a fortress." That night, Naomi pulled out the blueprint again in her mind, tracing the lines until she found the correlation: the underground facility in the blueprints wasn't under Delmore Tower at all. It was under the lodge. The land in the photographs was the same as the forest surrounding it, and if Kane was moving shipments there, then Project Delphi was bigger than she had imagined. Decided to test her theory by planting a tiny GPS tracker in one of the wine crates being prepped for delivery. She timed it so no one saw her slip into the loading bay. The tracker was smaller than a coin and stuck easily to the underside of the crate. The next day, when the shipment left, she was ready. She didn't have expensive tracking software, but she had a friend, Marcus, a former IT specialist who owed her a favor. Marcus didn't ask why she needed the signal traced. He just did it. Hours later, he called her. His voice was low and tense. "Naomi, I don't know what you're mixed up in, but whatever's at that location, it's not on any public maps. Satellite imagery is blurred. Blurred meant one thing: government clearance. The kind you only got when you had enough money or power to erase yourself from the grid." Naomi felt the chill run through her. She thanked Marcus and hung up, but her mind was already working faster. Kane was hiding something so big it had the power to make entire places vanish from official record. If she could prove it, she could destroy him. The next few days, Naomi kept her distance from Kane. He was in and out of the penthouse more than usual, and she suspected he was overseeing whatever was happening at the lodge. But the more she stayed out of sight, the more Kane seemed to notice. He started asking other staff where she was, how late she stayed, what routes she took home. The questions were casual on the surface, but Naomi recognized the scent of suspicion. He was testing the waters. Then came the night that almost exposed her. She had been in the utility tunnels for nearly an hour, checking for any sign of motion sensors when she heard the sound of boots on metal canes. Voice echoed through the tunnel, low but unmistakable. "You've got 20 minutes. Check every inch. If she's been down here, I want to know." Naomi's blood ran cold. She flattened herself against the wall, killing her flashlight and holding her breath. The guard's footsteps grew closer, but then turned down another branch of the tunnel. She waited until their echoes faded before slipping back toward the service elevator. When she returned to the staff quarters, she found something on her bed, a single white envelope. Inside was a note written in Kane's sharp, precise handwriting: "Stay in your lane, Naomi." For now, she told herself, she still had the advantage Kane suspected, but he didn't know what she had already uncovered, and as long as she kept moving carefully, the balance of power might still tilt in her favor, but deep down she knew the real game was only just beginning. 3 days later, Naomi got the message she had been waiting for. Marcus had tracked the GPS signal to a remote location deep in the northern forest, and it had stopped moving. That meant the shipment had arrived and was staying put. Naomi knew she couldn't waste time. Kane's trips up north were growing longer, which gave her a narrow window to investigate. She prepared carefully. The night before she left, she tucked her old maintenance uniform into a plain duffel bag along with a flashlight, the forged ID Marcus had made her, and a small camera disguised as a pen. If she was caught, the uniform and ID might buy her a few minutes to explain herself as a contractor, but she doubted Kane's security team would fall for it for long. Still, a few minutes might be all she needed. The journey to the lodge was a test in patience. She took a bus to the nearest small town, then rented an old pickup from a local man who didn't ask questions. The forest swallowed the road within minutes of leaving town. The deeper she went, the more the asphalt cracked and narrowed until it was little more than a dirt track. The trees leaned in heavy with mist, like they were trying to hide what lay ahead. She parked a mile from the lodge and continued, on foot. The air was thick with the smell of pine and wet earth. Every step brought her closer to the low hum she had been hearing for the last half hour. It wasn't natural. It was machinery. Naomi crouched behind a ridge and peered through. The trees. The lodge was bigger than she remembered from the photos Kane had hung in the penthouse. It wasn't just a hunting retreat. Now it was reinforced with concrete walls, floodlights, and cameras. The hum came from a generator at the rear surrounded by crates identical to the one she had tagged. Naomi waited until the guards on the eastern perimeter turned their backs, then slid down the ridge, moving low. She reached the generator and ducked behind it. The crates were marked with innocuous labels, but the weight distribution told her they weren't filled with wine. She pried open one lid just enough to see inside rows of black cases, each stamped with a symbol she didn't recognize. She took a quick photo with the pen camera and sealed the crate again. Her heart was pounding. Whatever was inside those cases was worth hiding from the entire world. She needed to see inside the lodge itself. Naomi crept to the side entrance she remembered from years ago when she had come here as part of the staff for one of Kane's winter parties. The lock had been upgraded to a keypad. She slipped the forged ID into the card reader slot, praying the override Marcus had programmed would work. The light turned green. She exhaled and pushed. The door opened. Inside, the air was colder, almost metallic. She found herself in a hallway lined with steel doors. Each had a number etched into the frame. Most were locked, but a few were ajar. She peeked into one and froze. The room was filled with computer servers, their blinking lights casting an eerie glow. Another door led to a lab-like space with tables covered in vials and strange devices. Some of the vials were marked with dates and codes Naomi didn't understand, but she knew instinctively. This was dangerous material. She heard footsteps approaching and ducked into the shadows. A man in a lab coat passed by, muttering into a headset. Naomi caught fragments of his words. The algorithm's nearly ready. The next phase begins next week. If Kane delivers the funding on schedule, we can bypass regulatory checks entirely. Naomi's chest tightened. Kane wasn't just hiding money or weapons. He was building something that could bypass laws and oversight entirely. The man disappeared into one of the server rooms, and Naomi took her chance. She darted toward the far end of the hall, where a heavy door stood slightly open. She slipped inside and found herself in what looked like Kane's private office. A large desk dominated the room with maps and files scattered across it. She took quick photos of everything: transport routes marked with red lines, bank documents with offshore account numbers, and a handwritten note that made her stomach drop: Delphi launch timeline. Q4, this is the year we change everything. Naomi was about to leave when she saw the photograph on the desk. It was of Kane shaking hands with a man Naomi recognized from news reports, a senior government official known for pushing through controversial tech policies. If this man was involved, Delphi wasn't just a private project. It was a potential national threat. She slipped the photo into her pocket and made her way back toward the exit. But halfway down the hall, an alarm blared. The sudden red. Lights and sirens shattered the silence. Naomi sprinted for the door. Her forged ID worked once, but the delay cost her precious seconds. She burst outside just as floodlights roared to life and voices shouted from the perimeter. She ran for the trees. The crack of a gunshot rang out behind her splintering bark, inches from her head. Naomi dove into the underbrush and crawled until she was sure the light no longer reached her. Then she kept moving, not daring to look back. The forest felt endless, but she finally reached the ridge where she had hidden the truck. She flung herself inside and started the engine gravel spitting from the tires as she sped away. Back in the small town, she parked the truck behind a shuttered gas station and sat, trembling. Her hands were still shaking when she called Marcus. "I have what we need," she said. "But Kane knows someone's been there." Marcus hesitated. "How much time do you think you have?" Naomi stared out at the empty road, her mind already calculating. "Less than I want," she said, "but enough to bring him down if I move fast." As she hung up, she realized the stakes had shifted. Kane had always been dangerous, but now she knew he had reach beyond money and influence. He had the means to alter laws, to rewrite systems to disappear anyone who stood in his way, and she had just made herself his #1 target. Naomi didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flashing red lights of the lodge, the steel doors, the cold lab, the man in the coat talking about bypassing regulatory checks. The word Delphi rattled around her head like a warning bell. She kept replaying Kane's possible reaction in her mind. She knew the moment he learned someone had breached his northern fortress, he would unleash everything he had. By morning, the first sign came. The coffee shop across the street. From her apartment, which had always been sleepy and harmless, now had a man in a suit sitting in the far corner pretending to read a newspaper. His sunglasses were still on indoors. Naomi recognized the type. He wasn't there for coffee. She turned away from the window and drew the blinds. Her phone buzzed. Marcus's voice was urgent. "Kane's people have been asking questions. He's looking for a woman matching your description. Last night wasn't a clean escape?" Naomi. She paced the room thinking, fast. If she went into hiding, she would lose momentum. The files and photos she'd taken were explosive, but they wouldn't mean anything if she didn't get them into the right hands. Marcus had connections, but even he admitted they were risky. The wrong recipient could leak her location straight back to Kane. Naomi knew her only chance was to get to a journalist she could trust, someone who wouldn't buckle under pressure or a bribe. She thought of Sarah Kim, a hard-hitting investigative reporter who had exposed corporate corruption in the past. Sarah had a reputation for protecting sources even under threat. Naomi sent her an encrypted message using an old anonymous channel from her activism days. It was simple, urgent, and direct. "I have proof of an operation that will compromise national safety. Billionaire Thomas Kane is involved. Need face-to-face safe location." She waited nearly an hour before a reply came. "Meet at the old rail yard midnight. Come alone." The rest of the day, Naomi spent preparing. She wore neutral clothes, dyed her hair a darker shade, and swapped her phone's SIM card. She left through the building's maintenance exit rather than the main door. She could feel the weight of being hunted in every step. The rail yard at night was all shadows and echoes. Rusted freight cars stood like abandoned giants. The air smelled of oil and rain. Sarah emerged from behind one of them, her hood pulled low. Her voice was brisk. "You weren't exaggerating, were you?" Naomi handed over a flash drive. "Kane's lodge north of here. It's not a retreat, it's a data and biotech hub. Whatever. Delphi it's nearly ready, and he's moving it without oversight." Sarah's eyes sharpened. She plugged the drive into a small, laptop, and scanned the folder. Her face went pale. "You understand what this means?" Naomi. "This isn't just Kane making money. This is a system capable of manipulating infrastructure, financial markets, even automated defense systems. If what's here is accurate, Delphi could alter the outcome of elections, crash economies, or worse. And you think he's launching this before the year ends?" Naomi nodded. "He's already bought his protection in high places." Before Sarah could respond, a crunch of gravel echoed from the far end of the yard. Headlights flickered on, blinding them. Naomi's heart stopped. 3 SUVs rolled in, blocking the exits. Men spilled out, dressed in black tactical gear. Kane's voice carried across the open space, calm and cruel. "You've cost me more than you could imagine, Naomi. And now you're going to make it right," Sarah whispered. Run and bolted toward the nearest freight car. Naomi followed, ducking between metal walls as shouts and footsteps thundered behind them. A gunshot rang out, ricocheting off steel. Sarah stumbled but kept moving. They reached a narrow gap between 2 stacked containers and slipped through. But one of Kane's men was already circling. Naomi grabbed a loose length of chain from the ground and swung it, catching him across the arm. He dropped his weapon with a snarl, and she kicked it away. They made it to the other side of the yard, where an old service tunnel opened into darkness. Without hesitating, Naomi shoved Sarah inside and followed. The tunnel was damp and narrow, their footsteps splashing through shallow water. They ran until the sounds of pursuit faded, replaced only by the drip of condensation and the hum of distant machinery. When they finally emerged, blocks away, Sarah was gasping. "You realize he's not going to stop, Naomi?" "I know," Naomi said. "But now we've got something he doesn't." She tapped her temple. "The one piece of information I didn't put on that drive. The location of his offshore account and the access code. If Delphi is his weapon, this account is his ammunition. Without it, he can't fund the launch on time." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Then we hit him where it hurts." Naomi nodded. "But we'll have to be smarter than tonight. He'll double his security and triple his reach." Sarah closed her laptop and straightened. "Then let's make the story too big to bury." That night, Naomi realized something had shifted. She was no longer just reacting to Kane's moves. She was setting the stage for his fall, and the next strike would have to be decisive. The next morning, Naomi and Sarah moved into action. They worked from a safe house deep in the industrial district, its walls lined with old soundproofing panels. Marcus joined them, bringing maps, burner phones, and a whiteboard covered in names and dates. Naomi laid it out. "Kane's public empire is the shield. The Lodge and Delphi are the sword. But his offshore account, that's the spine. We cut it. The body collapses." Sarah tapped the table. "The access code you have. How much is in the account?" Naomi hesitated. 193 million. Kane keeps it liquid for rapid movement. It's the fuel for bribes, logistics, and anything illegal that needs discretion. If we drain it and expose it at the same time, he can't fight both fronts. Kane would try to reclaim the money through legal channels, but the public scandal would destroy his protection. Marcus frowned. "We're talking about robbing one of the most connected men in the country." Naomi shot him a look. "We're not robbing. We're freezing. We dump it into escrow through a network of accounts controlled by NGOs. He can't buy his way out while we hand every receipt to journalists worldwide." Sarah grinned. "It's poetic, and it will make a headline." They spent 2 days building the digital assault. Sarah secured an air-gapped laptop. Marcus handled the physical routes. Naomi prepared her final weapon, a live broadcast file that would automatically stream to multiple independent media platforms once triggered. It contained video of the lab files from the lodge and an audio clip of Kane himself discussing bypassing safety protocols. The night they moved, it was raining again. The city seemed quieter than usual as Naomi made her way to the rooftop where their relay dish waited. Sarah's voice came through the earpiece. "I'm in position, Marcus. How's the perimeter? Clear for now, Marcus replied. But don't take too long. This is the part where his private security likes to appear out of nowhere. Naomi's fingers flew over the keyboard. Inside the network tunnel, she could see the fortress of Kane's financial systems. Every second she remained inside increased the risk of detection. Her pulse roared in her ears, but she kept going. One firewall fell, then another, then the account screen appeared. 6 figures blinking in steady green light. Naomi typed in the code, the numbers flickered, then drained into zeros. Rerouted at that moment, a new voice crackled through the earpiece. Not Sarah, not Marcus. Naomi. My patience is thin. Kane's tone was low-measured. You've taken enough. You think draining one account ends me, but you've made a mistake. You're in my building. Naomi froze. Her rooftop access door slammed open. 2 men stepped into the rain, weapons raised. Before they could advance, Marcus's truck roared into the alley below. He leaned out the window, throwing something up toward her. It skidded across the roof. A flare gun. Naomi caught it and fired. The flare burst overhead, bright. Red against the clouds, a signal for Sarah. Sarah triggered the broadcast. The entire world lit up with Kane's secrets. The lab footage rolled on news sites, social media, and encrypted activist channels. Kane's voice played on a loop alongside his. Face in boardrooms and private parties, his name trended in every country within minutes. On the rooftop, the men lunged. Naomi ducked between them, using the rain-slick surface to slide toward the edge. She grabbed a cable line and rappelled halfway. Before Marcus pulled her into the truck, they sped off, leaving Kane's men shouting in the downpour. By dawn, it was over. Kane's accounts were frozen. His corporate board announced an emergency removal, citing ethical breaches and pending investigations. The government announced a joint inquiry into Delphi and the biotech program. Kane vanished from public view. His private jets grounded his estates under watch. Naomi stood on the pier, days later watching the water shift under the morning light. Sarah joined her holding 2 coffees. You did it? Naomi shook her head. We did it. And maybe the next person thinking they can buy their way above the law will think twice. Sarah smiled. Or maybe they'll just be smarter. Naomi laughed. Bitterly. Then we'll be smarter too. The waves lapped against the pier. Naomi felt the wind on her face, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe without looking over her shoulder. She had been a maid. She had been invisible. But she had brought a billionaire to his knees. And she knew there were more giants out there waiting to fall.